Welcome to the NAESP Principal Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andy Jacks. I'm a principal at Ellis Elementary School in Manassas, Virginia, a proud member of Prince William County Schools. I'm also the senior fellow for NAESP's Centers for Advancing Leadership. So I'm super pumped today. I love doing the Principal Podcast. This is the place to go for real talk on school leadership. Shout out to NAESP for all the hard work that we do to connect, inspire, and educate our school leaders across the country and the world, in fact. Today, we have on my friend, super excited for you to be here, Molly Funk. Molly is a former principal. She's all sorts of cool things. She is now an integrative wellness coach. She provides integrative education services to associations, districts, and school leaders. She has a holistic and humanistic approach to professional learning, coaching, and teaching. She's a former, like I said, principal. She's a NAESP nationally certified mentor, trainer, and coach. And she's even a PhD student. So, Molly, I think you just like to learn and you like to talk about learning and schools and education altogether. What do you think?
I think nothing could be more true. I'm so glad to be here with you today, Andy, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to dive in to this conversation with NESP.
Yeah, so today we'll be talking about like your wheelhouse here, which is all about sort of, wellness with leadership and students, and really what does that mean internally and how can we help with these things, and which I think is a very timely topic. Before we kind of dive into it, how did you get to the place where you are now? Like, what is your background and your passion? How'd that all come together to this point?
Well, I started my career as an elementary school teacher and um, moved quickly into the role of a reading recovery teacher and literacy coach before moving into school principalship and really in a high needs turnaround setting. And fell in love with professional learning and coaching of my teachers. And like you, the taking care of the adults who take care of children and make the magic happen. We share that value and that passion. And began working with presenting at conferences and doing things like that. And this is way back in the 2010 or so, and just decided it was the career move that I wanted to make, and have been working with associations, districts, schools, and individuals in that capacity since about 2013. And as you know, we had this thing called the pandemic. And there was a busy lifestyle that was not healthy for me anyway, before that, and for many of us. And as I continued to work in schools around teacher and leader effectiveness and early literacy, I couldn't help but notice the unwell nature of the system. And what I mean by that is the children were more dysregulated than ever, and having a harder time. And the teachers, if we could get them,
Mhm.
were doing things like taking more mental health days and struggling to handle children with challenging behaviors. And I decided that, given my own experiences with mind body wellness, that I needed to investigate how we start intertwining the disciplines to support teachers, children, and leaders in schools to be places that co regulate and take care of one another.
Yeah, it's well said. It's funny because before this, you and I talk a bunch. We've talked a lot in the past. For good memories of mine are the back in the day doing the mentor training. Is where I
Yeah.
think we first met. Well, one thing I thought about that was we practiced doing elevator speeches in an actual elevator, which was kind of cool. And it was a elevator for like one story or something. So it had to be a fast elevator. I remember doing that, but I really enjoyed that time. So I can vouch for your coaching ability right there. Help me. So you brought up the pandemic, you brought up post-pandemic. In some ways we're out of the pandemic, kind of, the immediacy of it, but in a lot of ways we're still dealing with trauma from that. And we're like this whole recovery time period. So I'm gonna go a little bit off kind of where we are gonna go right away, which is systematically, I know you like talking about the sort of systems approach to wellness too, organizationally. What does that look like, with this sort of return to normal? And I'm air quoting. You can't see, if you're listening, you can't see my air quotes here, but I'm air quoting this return to normal, like, because nothing was ever normal before the pandemic either, like we pretend it is or was. So from a systematic standpoint, this whole recovery, what is that doing to us as well, besides, going through it ourselves personally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you didn't say the T word as much. This idea of trauma. What we do know is that from brilliant practitioners like Gabor Mate, that trauma isn't what happened to us; it's what happened inside of us because of what was going on around us. And so, every human on the planet experienced trauma, and so we have to imagine that everyone needs that same level of compassion and care, including ourselves, that we would provide children who had trauma in schools, for example. And the children who have had trauma, or anyone who's had any trauma in their lives, which, if you get to be middle aged like us, that's likely. We've
Mhm.
had experiences that were stressful and we suffered. That's
Mhm.
what trauma is. Now we're dealing with secondary and tertiary trauma. And what it's looking like is just really dysregulated from a nervous system perspective. Um, how do we approach this collectively? I honestly think um, the approach mirrors that of the spread of the coronavirus,
Mhm.
because we don't know what we don't know, but we do know that co-regulation is the quickest way to regulate others. And so if we begin to drop hotspots, or like scattering of seeds within systems, that's children, teachers, all staff, parents, and leaders, very intentionally, and teach them how to be mindful and regulate themselves, and then teach them how to regulate with others, we can really change things from the inside of the system while we're figuring out what is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think, I love what you're saying. I love trying to make connections to my everyday life, just like, you may be doing if you're listening right now. And I think for one connection I'm making is that, as a systems approach as a leader, if I'm trying to think about the people I'm working with and how to best support them, it is dealing with the inevitable either conflicts or the inevitable implementation phases that can be challenging. For instance, if you're adding, like many of us are adding new, very specific curriculum measures or new programs or initiatives or, remediation efforts and whatever, all these things that we're trying to do, which, like I said, some of that is nothing new, but right now there's a different sense of urgency to it, rightfully so. But the stress of these new things and the stress of your everyday things that maybe historically people could be fine with, I'm noticing that nowadays the stress of what I would consider more typical implementation problems, people's are really reacting strongly to that. So you're seeing more frustration earlier on. You're seeing more tears. You're seeing more anger. You're seeing all those things that I think are true human emotions that are people are entitled to, in ways that are a little bit different now than I think before. Because, we've been implementing things before that were challenging too. And so trying to think about how to best support that from a systematic standpoint, I think you're right. How do we take time to teach people how to kind of get through these challenging times? It's almost like, we need PD on the curriculum. We also need a ton of PD on self development and self monitoring. And like, because I know for myself, it's super hard too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. And that's really where the leader comes in, right? It's not only the design of a systems wide approach that the leader needs to be able to support, but it's really the influence of the leader on the organization and on others. Um, and we can't just have mindful Monday moments,
Right.
right? And, maybe this is a good time to just maybe clarify. two words, but one, the first one is I used without explaining, and that's regulation, emotional regulation, right? Or emotional dysregulation. And there's a misconception that emotional regulation means that someone's calm all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's that someone is able to ride those waves of ups and downs. And what you're describing is not that. You're describing these highs, low lows, and an inability to navigate daily things like, there was traffic on the way to work and that, or, somebody's child got sick in the car, or even that, the copy machine is jammed.
Mm-hmm.
So the regulation piece is about supporting leaders in understanding what that looks like, how they take care of themselves in order to be able to not only model that, but bring that to their teams and how they function when those things inevitably happen, because they do.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about, I think you're right about, you said something to the effect that, it's not just what's happening in school. It's, the realities of life, what's going on in their family lives, what's going around on their way to work, after work, all this, just the realities of just life, and that has a huge effect on all of us within the job itself. So I think as a leader, if we're not mindful about how to help the whole, just like we talk about the whole child, the whole adult,
Yeah.
And something I remember early on when I was assistant principal, the principal time, Janet Greer, she had us read the career life cycle of the career teacher or something like that. And it was really, I still remember because it talked a lot about how your life changes as you go through your teaching career. It has nothing to do with teaching, it's nothing to do with your life. You have kids, you get married, all the above, right? You have to deal with your own parents and what they're going through. And so all of those things have a huge effect on you in different ways as you go. So it's not like all of a sudden you just get past everything and you're fine and you're good for a while, right? So there's constant change that we're going through. So what are some ideas on how principals can maybe help with that co-regulation? I know for me, I keep thinking about positive routines. I love positive routines, right? It's like things that I can do that help me stay in a good space, not just for myself, like from a self-disciplinary standpoint, we could talk about, but just from as a school. This year we started weekly assemblies for the kids so that we could get together, do fun things and be connected. Staff gave us input to do like quick check-in weekly staff meetings that are really tight and quick and focused, as opposed to the big, long, drawn-out ones. And that was a great way for us to get it connect. So, and then we have a lot of other fun things too, but just, how can leaders really think about help and support their staff when, they're going through a lot of stuff that's completely out of our control?
Yeah. And this is really difficult for most of the leaders who I know who are dedicated to serving others. And I know that hits home for both of us as well. And that level of commitment, that level of sacrifice, the most important thing a leader can do is take care of him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
And self-care, has gained popular attention. But it's been really secularized, as in, I'm going to take a self-care day and go get a pedicure, or,
right. Yeah.
And self-care is anything that someone does very intentionally to take care of their emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual well-being and health.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to look different for everyone.
Right.
But it is required in order to begin to lead, to begin to be regulated ourselves and be able to navigate moving through this challenging time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you think about, like you said, it means something different to everybody. And one thing I'm gonna really push, if you're listening out there and you're, like, what does that mean, right? I'd say, what it means sometimes is you got to be more disciplined within your school day, not just what's going on after the school day. Like I said, like sometimes a day off is good, but sometimes a day off, all you're gonna do is worry about everything in school. you know, that's
That's
what makes
true, for sure.
but it's like within your school day, how can you manage your time better so that if you know, for instance, you have a challenging meeting coming up, that you take some time, you carve out time after that meeting to go do something positive, or actually just take a break, or go take a walk, or go chill and do nothing, like listen to music or something. Like if you know, or like if you have a principal meeting that is going to be like blasted with all sorts of stuff that you got to know and do, well, take a minute to just digest it. You don't have to necessarily run into the very next thing right away. No one's making you do all that. You feel like you're obligated to do that, and you can't do nothing all day long. But you can definitely carve in time that you can predict, kind of look ahead for the week and predict where are those hot spots. I think when I was talking to you earlier, there's something that caught me is like you can look at hot spots throughout your week. When are times that you may be a little bit emotionally dysregulated because of just the nature of the job, and then what can you build in to sort of balance that out so that you aren't leaving every day completely exhausted, completely crazy, that you can balance it throughout that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you started talking about it. You asked me what are some ways,
Mm-hmm.
and that's intentionally planning for that during the day, like you mentioned. And for example, one principal who I work with began overbooking the time for every meeting by by 10 minutes. And so her calendar was free, and that was time for her to digest and gather herself. Um, Another thing is really, why is it important?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because when we are in a dysregulated state, we know this about kids, our prefrontal cortex is offline. What kind of decisions do you want to make as a leader? Because we make all of them during the day, right? Do I want to make a decision that is holds me in integrity, that aligns with my values,
Mm-hmm.
that is kind and compassionate in all the ways that it can be? Then I need to be regulated. I
Mm-hmm.
need to know how to get there
Mm-hmm.
so that the decisions that I'm making, how I'm responding instead of reacting to the things that are coming at me, are most in alignment with who I am
Mm-hmm.
at my core.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that piece about mindful leadership, what does that really mean? I think it's important to focus on building mindfulness in oneself.
Mm-hmm.
Self care is a great way to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? How many times a day do you sit and intentionally breathe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a breathing. People, pun intended, people blow off that as a strategy
Yeah.
sometimes. But it still keeps coming out as one of the most effective things. I just saw the one viral thing that's going around where if you take two quick in breaths and then a slow out breath, there's like research that shows does whatever. It's true. You just got to do it. Something else that caught me when you said that is about your core values. We talked a lot about that here in our district, about core values and about kind of what you stand for. Our superintendent does a great job of really explaining hers and kind of reminding us about how she makes decisions that way. I think for me, that really helps kind of remind you who you are and who you're not, who you want to be, and who you're okay with being. Like at some point, you got to be fine with who you are and what you're good at, what you're not good at. And if like certain things are a core value to you, then that's what's the most important. If it's not a core value to you, then you can just say to people, that's not something for me personally that I'm taking on as a value. That may be for you, and I can help support that. But ultimately, my core values, some things that I think are really important that we do either collectively or myself, are X, Y, Z. And that's why I'm going to really focus all in on those things and be okay with that. We can't do
Yeah.
it all. You can really focus.
Yeah. And that kind of comes back to this idea of, everyone really wants to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our authenticity comes out of this really being present and knowing ourselves in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this may be a good spot to clarify what I mean by mindfulness, or kind of what the literature supports as is the most common definition. And that comes from John Kabat-Zinn, and he is a well-known author, but really considered the father of mindfulness. He says that mindfulness is awareness that one achieves through paying attention on purpose and non-judgmentally to one's present moment experience.
So for a principal that loves to multitask, that's probably not the right alignment, huh? Right?
Well, what it is non-judgmentally too. It's acknowledging that mindfulness isn't something you do. It's a way you are, and
Right.
it takes practice. It's like any other habit that you build in your life,
Mhm.
right? We make choices, and you said time management, and I know that I said the other day too, like energy management.
Yeah.
How am I going to show up the most authentic, present person in each of my experiences today? And we can't do that when we have a task list running through our heads.
I was gonna say right on that too. I'm thinking, it's quality over quantity, right? And when you are trying to multitask too much with this task list, I'll just be reflective. I find myself spending more energy than is needed at that given time because I'm trying to do too many things at once.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get exhausted. You're not staying as focused. You're not as authentic. You're not as mindful to the person in front of you, et cetera, right? When in reality, a lot of those things that you're trying to do all together at the same time still don't get done anyways, right? So it's like
Right.
you're sort of wasting your time in a way by trying to be more efficient. You end up being less efficient.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier.
We
Your to-do list can't be more important than those people right in front of you, right?
mhm.
And so,
We can multitask, but we cannot multi-attend.
oh, there you go. There you go.
And you mentioned building these things into your day, like these 15-minute staff meeting check-ins and weekly assemblies, because
Mhm.
you know and understand the power of connection,
Mhm.
the power of relationship. That also shows up in how we co-regulate with others. That's why it's co.
Mhm.
That connection is a powerful piece. But are we really showing up present
Mhm.
when we go to engage with someone?
Mhm.
Because if we're not, then that connection isn't growing in a way that if you are mindful and you practice mindfulness,
So
that you,
I'm sorry, but perfect example, I'm trying to make this like real like practical in a sense, right? So I'm thinking if I'm going to a collaborative learning team, like a grade level team meeting, and I'm trying to again, we can multitask that. We all do that anyways, no matter what. But if I'm trying to run through like a to-do list while that meeting's happening, so I'm trying to like attend the meeting to kind of participate, air quotes, participate, but then I'm also trying to get some other things done on the side. If they see that I'm multitasking right in front of them, they may take it as in I'm not really attending to them with my full mind and spirit of the thing. And so then you're not going to really, even though you're there, it's almost like you might as well not even be there because you're not truly making that authentic connection that you should be or want to be doing, which is why you're there in the first place. So, is that right? Something like that?
that is exactly um, what is considered a non-example of being present, right?
Right.
What may be more effective is in that situation, let's just say there's those things to do, would be to acknowledge that you are attending for the purpose of attending, for representing. It is not your intention to be fully present in this meeting. And so you may say, hey guys, I really want to be here. And I have this other important deadline that I'm working on. I'm going to sit over here and listen in as I can.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be in the room, but I'm also acknowledging to everyone, I'm not faking that I'm going to be present with you.
Oh, that's a
I'm
good point.
being I'm being really honest that I have this other thing to do, but being here with you while you have this in case you have questions or whatever, I'm here and can pop in. So there's a level of transparency that comes with, like you said, owning your own stuff,
Mhm.
right? I'm not pretending to be present. That really takes me to, so what are some key components of mindful leadership then? Right? So what does this matter?
Mhm.
And mindful leadership is really about the practice of using one's inner and outer awareness. So I have to be aware of myself and aware of what's going on around me that I can't do if I'm not present.
Mhm.
And with authenticity and the perspective of really considering the whole, right? How am I showing up to this? How are other people showing up? And being willing, and there's a huge piece of this, to create boundaries and be transparent in that. And boundaries really being about what I will do, right? I will attend this meeting and I will sit in the back and I'll let
Mhm.
everyone know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And that's how I take care of myself in that moment.
Yeah, and I think too, we talk about boundaries. I think, our leadership role has turned in such a servant leadership role, which, I try to practice, but I definitely preach it, which is, the more that you can put yourself in a servant mindset to help others and support others, it's always a better place to be. The challenge is that it's hard to prevent yourself from becoming a martyr, and like
Mhm.
there's a difference between a servant and a martyr, and so in our world where busier is always better, apparently, right? um Creating these boundaries so that it is okay to close your door if you have to get some stuff done. It is okay to leave at a certain time of day if you have an appointment. It is okay to you know do whatever, do those things that you have to do, like every normal person has to do, because if you don't, you just run yourself into the ground anyways. And I really been challenge myself and challenge others to really think about how can you create a different rhythm to your day. If you're feeling your day is so stressed out, how do you change the rhythm of your day to give you
Mm.
these ebb and flows, to make it more natural, as opposed to like, you're just running from one thing to another.
Yeah, and I think that's it, because if we're present, right, in those experiences, we recognize, or we begin to recognize, what we need.
Mhm.
So building them in as not only important for myself, but how I serve without self-sacrifice. I mean,
Mhm.
what happens to martyrs?
Mhm.
That's why they're called a martyr. I mean, do we
Right.
really want to be martyrs?
That's right.
Right? They're only a martyr because they self-sacrificed,
Right.
and to the point of death.
Right.
So let's be thoughtful that it's that ebb and flow. It's the balancing of movement and busy and stillness and peace and solitude and care. Um, and another key component for principals who are listening and leaders who are listening is to think about, what does that rest look like for them?
Mhm.
Um, Oftentimes, if I ask leaders, when I'm coaching them, what does rest look like? They're like, I don't have time to nap,
Mhm.
right? Or I don't get enough sleep, or sleep is a challenge for me.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but that was my life as a principal too, And so recognizing that we need lots of different types of rest. For example, um, we need physical rest, right? We need that good amount of sleep. Um, we need relaxation, whether or not that's, Netflix and a cup of tea on your couch.
Mhm.
We also need mental rest, especially after a day. And a lot of people find things like music or meditation helpful for that mental rest. Um, and if you struggle to sit still and take that, turn your brain off, the rule of thumb is, if your mind is racing, move your body,
Mhm.
right? So just imagine for a moment that we are all full of energy, right? Just like when we eat, our energy in our body goes to our stomachs to digest.
Mhm.
If all of the stuff is up here in our brains, right, we need to get the energy into the rest of our body and out of our brains. So it could be something as simple as taking some deep breaths. It could be going for a short walk, and with the intention of clearing your mind and thinking about, not thinking, right? And not judging yourself for having a clogged brain either is part of it.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to whatever your personality is too, right? Kind of what drives you, what, kind of gives you that, kind of rejuvenation, everything else. There's a couple of strategies I heard recently too. They're interesting. If you're super stressed out, anxious, and trying to kind of regulate yourself, the whole, really focusing on different senses around you, the sight, sound, touch, sort of one at a time. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Like almost really focusing on one at a time because it really wires your brain to kind of reduce the rest of the noise. Another one,
It's called a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding.
see, you're the
I
yeah, that's
I
all.
actually have that listed on. So part of my work with schools and organizations is thinking about children and adults and language we can use to support these things.
Mhm,
What are some easy peasy 60 to 90-second strategies that I, as a teacher, can use? I, as a principal, can use, and my children can use.
mhm,
And that we recognize that in one another, that we and ourselves, that we need a minute,
mhm,
right? Or we recognize our class is rolling on the floor and
mhm,
we know, okay, we need an easy peasy strategy. And there are all of those strategies that we can use with our children. And so having a common language of regulation is part of the work from a systems perspective.
for sure. Yeah, another one I heard, the one where it's like, I think it's something about like colors of the rainbow. If you look intentionally for like different colors of the rainbow, like I see something red. Let me go look for something red. Okay, there's that picture has a red in it. Okay, now look for, something orange. Okay, look for something orange, look for something orange. You know what I mean? And so I think I love those kind of strategies because it's something to do for people like me that are restless, as opposed to just sit there and breathe and think of nothing. It's like impossible for me to think of nothing, right?
Right.
So like,
Right.
so if you give me something to do that takes my mind off something, that's probably better, right? So I love that. And then another thing I was thinking about is really something I've been trying really hard to do this year, and is to intentionally do nothing at times with people. Like I am such a doer, and probably if you're in this role, you're a doer and you're constantly
Mm-hmm.
trying to feel the need to kind of like check everything off. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a vicious cycle. The more you do things, especially fast pace, magically you find more things you have to do, right? And I'm not saying don't do your work, but there is a reality of connecting with people that is not your to-do list. Like, for instance, like if I'm only seeing you, like Molly, if I'm only coming to you because I need you to fill out a report, or I need you to turn in some paper, or I need to see your lesson plans, or I need to, whatever, that's all you think of me as, not a person. But if I'm coming to you just to, not even just to check on you, but just to talk to you, like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What are you up to? How's your weekend? And it sounds so stupid and easy. I know personally in reflecting, I have to like make a point of doing it, but I can't like put it on my list. Like I can't say go see Molly and connect with her. Like I can't really do that.
Right.
But I need to just make it an intentional part of my day to not fill it with things, so that I can just like literally sit down and somebody, hey man, what's going on? How's it going? And then start joking around. And before you know it, you're laughing. One of my goals coming in this year, this is my own self-care, was I know that in my life I need like laughter and joking around medicine.
Yeah.
And so one of my goals was that every day I want to laugh at least one time per day before I go home. Whether it's a stupid joke that people are making, it's a funny story, it's banter, it's messing around. And so far, just about every day, we've had some level of joking around. And what you find is that other people really enjoy that too. And when you're
Yeah.
laughing together, I tell you, that's nothing like connecting when you're laughing together like that. Um, and just as long as they're not laughing at you all the time, a little bit, I'm okay with. Little story
Right.
to go on that one. I'm going to ask you about that. Is so we did a storybook character day, and our staff, uh, our office staff, on their own decided to dress up as bees, and they asked me to be the beekeeper. So we had probably like 8 different people, including my male bookkeeper, my finance specialist, who's from Jamaica, and he personalized the Jamaican bumblebee sweatshirt.
Oh my gosh, how cool.
His little daughter's like 3 years old. She's the cutest little thing, and she wore these little It's awesome. So no, you can find a video out there for me. It's so dumb, but it's hilarious. The laughter in creating that video was so fun. It's like those little memories. Someone said, "This is the best day ever." Just silliness, right? And I think if you can catch that magic in a bottle, That's connecting a way that you just can't, like I said, put on a to-do list. It's not part of an action plan. You're right. It's not part of a improvement thing you're trying to do as a school. It's just real and authentic and fun.
I think what you're describing is being fully present in the moment.
Trying. It's pretty hard
Well,
for that.
I think I don't think you're trying. I think you're doing, and I think that's so much grace has to come in here as leaders if they choose, if they choose to know that they have this influence over the people around them by taking care of themselves, by being present. That's a choice. And it's a choice that sometimes, a choice every time has outcomes. And the outcomes can be the laughter, or the outcomes can be missing that opportunity, to reply to an email right then, but that's okay, right? There's no judgment in the choices. I think that's part of what is also a key component of mindful leadership is autonomy,
Mhm.
standing in personal responsibility for our choices. Nobody's making you stressed, right? There are things that are stressors, but how you move through them, how you choose to move through them, and how that leaks out sometimes on the world around us, that happens to everyone. But we do have responsibility to show up in the best way we can on any given day. And that
Yeah,
starts with that self care piece.
yeah, and as we're wrapping up here, I think we started with this idea of like co-regulation, and I feel like we're kind of
Mm.
coming right back to it, right? And I think that whenever you can find this like meaningful, connection with people in a way like I was talking about, it's good for them and you. It's good. It's a win-win, a true win-win. You feel better, you feel more relaxed, they feel better, more relaxed, and it can't all be just fun, silly stuff, but there's other meaningful work that we do at times that also has that same effect. Completing a system, you create a new system. I know some people are very systems oriented, right? You create a new system that gives you a new kind of structure to, achieving some goal, and everyone's like, man, we did it, this is something we created together. Well, take the time to kind of celebrate that and really recognize each other for that and be like, man, we just crushed this out, we did this, it's amazing. Before you move on to that next thing, I think it's super important. So what are some other maybe last
Um,
minute tips on co-regulation?
yeah, so thank you. Co-regulation is a key component of regulation. Um, we all know about sympathetic and parasympathetic states, right? This idea that we have a rest and digest state, and then we have a fight, flight, freeze, any of those maladaptive coping mechanism responses from a nervous system perspective. It, it is now evolved into really three states. And you can Google the polyvagal ladder for anyone who's interested. And we know that in order to move through those states, right? I'm having a great day, things are going my way. Oh my gosh, I locked my keys in my car. We come down here, and then we have to move through another state. And that's really dealing with that emotion or behavior that came up for us, right? Where we're anxious. And um, in order to do that and to do it most effectively, we do it with someone else. That social engagement is a key component of moving people back into a regulated state. And so, when if people want to find out more information about that, I actually have created a guide for co-regulation. It's the 3 C's. And it really mirrors those polyvagal states. But it's in language that we can use that's kid friendly, and teach one another. So I'll make sure that that resource is available as well. But um, I'm working on an early childhood version of it right now so that we can teach the same language to little children if their friend is crying or someone is, having a rough day and in their space.
Yeah, and I think,
It
more and more we talk about kids, always bring back to kids is we can't emphasize enough that we do have to really make this, idea of self-regulation, self-discipline, all of that self-awareness part of a mandated curriculum, just like we do reading and writing and math.
Mm.
Because if you look at all these skills that adults need to have to be successful in careers, we always bring it down to those things. But also, just the way the world is going is that, you're gonna be able to get a lot of information out there. But what you can't get necessarily is someone to do the inner work, inside
Mm.
of you. That's something that you really have to work at yourself, and you can get help for coaching, but as far as like, making it a priority is a big deal. It's bigger than ever, I think.
Mm.
So
May I offer one more,
yeah.
offer a little stretch on the co-regulation piece, and the necessity that we have to teach children. Um, I see it a little bit more like an umbrella instead of an added thing that we teach.
Mhm.
And that's really where the leadership piece comes in,
Mhm.
right? We design a way of being, reducing the amount of doing, and having that being, that how we are with one another,
Mhm.
that supports all of the things that happen in the school, including having children be regulated enough to learn and adults to be regulated enough to engage in the ways that they want to, why
Mhm.
they got into their career in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm making a real connection too. If you think just like we were talking about how we need to create time within our day to kind of create that space and rhythm to the regulation, I think we need to do that, students. If we're I don't want downtime. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if we're too busy in our lessons, and if we're too, running from point A to point B and relate to, wherever we're going all the time, well, then our kids are going to feel that as well. So
Yeah.
if we can settle down within our lessons as teachers, I know that teachers that have really effective classroom management, they have a clear sense of, like you said, presence in their room. They're always in it with their kids. In fact, I remember Miss Grant, a teacher, one of the schools I was with, she's awesome. If I walked into her room as a principal, she's very respectful, but she was pretty clear that she had a job to do with her kids, right? And so it was like we had a great relationship, and it was funny because she would always be like, before she's right back in it. She just could not be in it with her kids, always present with them. I always admired that about her. So it's a
Mm.
lesson to help our teachers understand as well, right? So, all right. So, Molly, how can people get a hold of you or connect with you?
Probably the best way is just contact me through the website. It's lovelearnleadtogether.com, or Love Learn Lead Together on Instagram. I'm public on social profiles, but um, email, website's great. And if you're interested in finding out more about how to create an emotionally regulated school, or any of the free resources for strategies, or the 3Cs guide, I'll make sure that they're linked in the information.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your time, my friend, and it's great to connect again. And I appreciate everything you're trying to do for education and for our schools out there.
Uh, Thanks for your leadership, Andy. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
All right, listeners, if you want to get more information, check out other episodes of the Principal Podcast, and all sorts of supports out there in education by NAESP at naesp.org. So that's it for now. We'll talk to you soon.